you don't get to interview, sadly, you don't get to interview everyone as part of an acquisition process. So there is an element of gut feel and trust in the team, and that's been paid back in spades.
Paul Green's MSP Marketing Podcast.
Extended interview.
Hi, I'm Nicholas Ashford. I'm the partner at Ford House, which is an investment firm, and we've invested into Zen0, the UK MSP, very recently.
My name's Rob Hamilton. I was a founder and CEO of Dynamic Edge, and initially a Scottish-based MSP that we grew over 13 years. I exited the business in October 2020 to Zen0, who acquired the entire share capital of the business. Since then, I've been sitting with my feet up.
I bet you haven't, Rob, at all. We're going to explore in a second exactly what you've been doing with your time. Now, thank you both for coming on the show. We were introduced, Nicholas, through Zen0, which was an MSP that I did some work with quite a few years ago now. And it was wonderful to meet you and to hear how you've been investing into Zen0 and really, helping that business to grow and also do some acquisitions. So, Nicholas, we're going to talk to you in the second half of the interview about acquisitions. And I know you've got some great advice for MSP owners who are looking to exit their business this year or next year or the year after. Rob, let's start with you. I want to explore your journey because it's always fascinating hearing the journey of a business owner, of someone who has done something that we're all trying to do. Tell us when you got started with your MSP.
Back in 2008, when the then CEO of Microsoft announced they were investing $9 billion globally in this thing called cloud, I kind of thought, yeah, this could be big. I was with an MSP at the time, and I went to their MD and said, I think this is going to be the next big thing, and I'd like to really push our business forward. I was promptly told that we did cabling and networking only, that this cloud thing won't take off. So that kind of spurred me to make the decision to go and do it alone. So it was a complete startup. I didn't take any clients with me. It was effectively get out there and build your own base. That was back in 2009 when I kicked it off. And in 2010, we were acknowledged by Microsoft as their first partner in the UK to strategically lead with cloud technologies, which to this day I'm especially proud of.
So that's a hell of an achievement to achieve that in just 1 year. What did you do to get started? Because so many people start their own business and they win a few clients or just through the sheer power and energy of getting going with it. But then very quickly they reach that point where they're too busy doing the work to go out and win new work. So Rob, what did you do to grow the business so quickly?
Initially, it was myself and my then business partner, and we were out doing the graft effectively, doing the income generation side of things, and I was doing the business development. One thing, and Nick's known me for almost 2 years now, I can sell, and I'm confident I can sell anything, to be fair. So I knew that was something that I had in the backpack. So I structured the business so I was billable for 3 days a week initially because I knew on that basis I could get by and survive, but the additional 2 days was back-to-back meetings with new prospects and really pushing that forward. We had some really great early wins that we were lucky to get. So visionaries that thought that were on the same hymn sheet as me and they saw cloud as being the way forward for their business invested in us to put them on the cloud and to support them going forward, which was really fortunate, and it gave us an income stream that was out with the kind of forecasts I'd expected, which allowed me to kind of start to go and get a first, second, third employee and kind of grow it from that point in. I'd always bowed to those that I employed who were smarter than me and passed on duties to them, and I've done that to this day going forward. So that's kind of where it started effectively. A couple of lucky early wins, and then the ball started rolling.
Was the goal always to build something big that was independent of you?
It wasn't initially. I mean, as with any small business, I think your main target is hitting that 1 million revenue part. And then when you get there, you decide then what we do next. And in our case, it was to hit the 3 million over probably the last, 6 years ago. My business partner, Stuart Winterburn, who's still the managing director of Dynamic Edge. At that point, I was MD, and I thought, no, this guy, I trust him implicitly. And I made a decision on a whim, effectively, to say, right, I'm giving you this job title. I'm going to become the CEO and kind of pull myself away from the day-to-day operational side. And that was 6 years ago, and that was a great decision I made to do at that time. And he did a great job. it's key things like that. And then getting a technical director on 2 years ago that was far superior to anyone we had in the business in terms of experience. So it's passing away control, and I don't have any problem with that, to the right people, the trusted people, and that's always something I've done over the years. Yeah.
No, I sold a business back in 2016, and if I look back to, that was my first business, it was a marketing business, and if I look back to what made me want to sell it, because it's a very emotional decision to decide to exit a business. It wasn't one of those things where I woke up one morning and that's it was done. I think it was a bit of a gradual realization over time that the business was finished. What I mean by finished was it could survive, in fact thrive without me, and also that I was bored, and for me to get onto the next level, and we were only doing $1 million, it wasn't a massive business, but for me to get onto the next level, it would require re-engineering the business because of the way that we ran that marketing business. For you, Rob, was it a sudden realization, or was it something that you were working towards over a period of time?
It was something that I'd always entertained, and being in the field that I'm in, you regularly get approaches and people want to have a chat with you. I met with Nick and Freddie from Ford House initially. Keep me right here, Nick. I think it was April 2020, which was really enlightening, and kind of doing the groundwork in Ford House and what they're about and where they've come from and acquisitions they'd made to date at that point. It really interested me. But looking at it on paper, I didn't think our business would give the value that I perceived it could do if I stuck with it and we really grew over the next 2 or 3 years. But the whole COVID situation taught us a lot in terms of how we could get rid of expensive offices and move to serviced office accommodation and really make the business sharper, more profitable, and so forth. So that was the point. We decided, right, let's be serious about this. Let's see where we can go from there. So
Nicholas, let's bring you into this. Just tell us a little bit more about your background. So do you have a tech background, or are you here to put together a super MSP, for want of a better phrase?
Yeah, so in terms of my background, I've always had a residual interest for technology. I was one of those, I used to kind of build a computer, yourself, kind of when you're at school and that kind of thing. But then I kind of progressed in my career, management consultant. Spent some time with Capgemini as well, which is obviously quite tech focused. And then I was, been the owner of an SME myself and a managing director, and done the acquisition trail there. So I understand what it's like to be in the thick of it, doing it.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I've never built a computer, by the way. In fact, if I even tried to build a computer, there would be fire, electrical discharges, there would be death and destruction. It would be absolutely horrendous. Now, without making...
fair, I think if I tried to do that today, it would also be the same.
Yes. And I suspect that Rob would actually say the same thing, because I'm sure you've been hands-off tech for some time, Rob. As I was saying to you just before the podcast interview, you do know it's Windows 11 these days, don't you? Nick, without making Rob blush, what was it that made Dynamic Edge a really good fit for what you're trying to do with Zenzero and the companies that you're building up?
There are lots of people in the market, consolidating MSPs, and there's broadly two ways of doing it. One way is kind of what we call the bag of bits, where you just go and try and bring anything into the business and just grow quite quickly, but you end up with a kind of just a bag of bits, and ultimately you have to sort that out at the end. But you can do that quite fast if you're indiscriminate. And then there's another way where you're a lot more considered and take your time, and you kind of specifically look for things that are right fit. And it is a slower process, and you spend more time kind of figuring out the right partners. But that's our approach, and Zenzero's approach, and very much kind of when we met Rob and Dynamic Edge, there's a couple of things and again, not to make you blush, like I said, but actually, particularly with owner-manager or owner-led businesses, the person at the top will have a disproportionate influence on the rest of the business versus, a larger corporate. So weirdly enough, as a proxy, if you meet someone and that feels right and everything they say kind of matches up and who they are shines through, that is actually a really big indicator. And then on the other side, when Rob took us to the business, and obviously, these signs, such as Rob talked before about being, in the cloud really, really early, not having a load of technical debt, those things showed it was a progressive, forward-looking company. And I think Rob's decision, which he alluded to earlier, to bring Stuart in to be the MD, and then Rob sitting as CEO, meant he had done all that groundwork to actually not be involved in the day-to-day grind of that business, and that gives a huge amount of confidence. You then know there is a management level and structure that becomes very attractive from that point of view, and the team are fantastic, and that's been borne out. You don't get to interview, sadly, you don't get to interview everyone as part of an acquisition process. So there is an element of gut feel and trust in the team, and that's been paid back in spades.
But you're still buying people. So as much as you're buying a company with processes and structure and contracts and clients, you're also buying the people. And in fact, it's just refreshing to see Rob and yourself on the same call. Bearing in mind, it's been some time, Rob, since you sold the business. You don't have to do something like this, and I think that shows actually the relationship that you've got with Nicholas and his team, and that what they've done with your business has clearly been the complete opposite of leaving you, sad or distressed that you sold your business. So many people sell their businesses and regret it afterwards, or feel that the new owners haven't looked after it.
I mean, I still speak to Stuart probably every couple of days, and he'll come to me for some advice, whatever. I will do that as long as I'm around. But the embarrassing thing is the performance since I left has been better than it was when I was part of the business.
And you've just committed that to tape as well. That was in the permanent record now. That one is.
But I think your point about people's completely right. We look at it actually very simply. If you look after people and you look after the clients, the rest actually will look after itself. When I went through the acquisition process myself as an SME owner, perhaps initially I didn't look at people enough as people, and there was a tendency to go, it's a number on a page, and actually the people, the culture, those things are so important. It's the iceberg below the surface, and that's the stuff that actually really, really matters. Even on the surface of it doesn't necessarily look like that, and no one talks about it.
Okay, thank you. Final question for you, Nicholas, which is for an MSP listening to this podcast who is thinking, hey, maybe this is the year, or maybe early next year. What are the kind of areas that they should be focusing on to make their business look as attractive as possible to potential acquirers?
Yeah, I think obviously having a decent revenue line and a decent profit line is important, but that's obvious. I think going further into that is, what is the components of that revenue? You're shifting a load of hardware, you're shifting a load of tin, and that's 50% of your sales. That's not that interesting. But if you have high recurring revenue, then that is interesting, because you don't have to fight for it each month. An acquirer can have a certainty that revenue will be there 6 months after they bought the business. If it's just a load of Microsoft licensing, okay, that's recurring revenue, but it's commoditized, and actually that's not differentiated. If you're doing some Dynamics work or Power Platform with clients that are every month spending on that as they build out their tooling and their systems, that is really sticky. That is really sticky recurring revenue, and that is super interesting. So, my advice would be, bring up that recurring revenue number, and focus on things that are truly kind of value additive, not commodities.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Nicholas, tell us a little bit more about your acquisition plans, and how can an MSP get in touch with you if they want to have an initial confidential conversation?
We're on a journey with Zenzero to build the leading MSP for SMEs in the UK, and it's a multi-year journey, and I'm very lucky to speak to MSP owners that just want to have a chat because they want to understand what their business might be good to do, and other ones that are like, I want to go and play golf in the Algarve in the next 2 weeks. What can we do here? So the full range, and just happy to have a chat. And sometimes it's a multi-year process, and sometimes it's a lot shorter depending where people are. In terms of getting in contact with us, forwardhouse.team is the website. My email address is njsa@forwardhouse.team, or otherwise via zenzero.co.uk, the MSP as well.
That's brilliant. Thank you both for being on the podcast. Now, we're going to enter our extended interview here. So now we're on stuff that's just only for YouTube. And there are a number of things that you mentioned throughout this interview, which I just want to pick up on, if that's okay. And Rob, I'm going to start with you. You talked about earlier about structuring your day. So fairly early in your business journey, did you say, was it 2 days that you put aside for sales and 3 days for operations? What was it that made you, because no one does that. No one does that at that stage. They do it when they get to a point of distress. So what was the thing that made you decide that was actually a smart thing to do?
I knew some other SME owners that got in the rut of just doing a 5-day operational billable thing, and before you know it, that you're just a contractor. Really, there isn't an SME business to grow there, and sales is business development over the last 15, 20 years has been my thing. And I knew if I was going to grow this and grow it to where I wanted to be, I had to dedicate a substantial amount of my time, and that was 40% of my working week. So Yeah, I'm funny like that, and it will be in my calendar at that point. If I look back to 2009, those are the days I'm out selling, and the week before I'd be making those meetings back to back for the days I'm promoting the company. So it is all about structure, absolutely, and you've got to stick by that.
Yeah, Nicholas, you talk to lots of business owners, and I know you have investments outside of our world, outside of the tech world. Do you see a correlation between those people who are very structured in their time, like Rob has been and presumably continues to be, and do you see a correlation between that focus and the results that they get out of the business?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a great phrase which is called discipline equals freedom. And that might sound counterintuitive, but if you are structured and rigorous in what you do, then actually you end up giving yourself more free space to do other things. And particularly as a business owner, it's really easy to do everything, get pulled down into the weeds, and then you never quite get to develop your business. And by Rob doing what he did, he forced these time blocks where not only he wasn't going to work on the business, but someone else would have to work on those bits of the business while he actually developed it kind of further from a sales point of view or more strategically. So it forces other people to also take those reins. And I think a lot of MSP owners maybe get stuck at around the close to the 1 million mark because they're doing 2 full-time jobs as it is, and they can't take the business forward.
Discipline equals freedom. You're going to listen to the podcast in about 4 weeks' time, and I'll trot that out as if I've come up with that. I love that. That's going to become one of my phrases. So thank you for that, Nicholas. Rob, you mentioned earlier from going from the million business to the 3 million to the 5 million. I told you I'd sold my business when it was around about 1 million, and we'd got stuck. I wouldn't quite say it was in a rut, but the things that had worked well to get us to 1 million clearly weren't going to work to get us to 3 million. Just I don't need to go into the details of it, but it was a marketing agency, and I knew that it wasn't scalable to do. To work the way we were working times 3. And that was one of the reasons I sold. I couldn't be bothered. After 11 years, I couldn't be bothered to go and do the work that needed to be done to reinvent the business to get up to 3 million. Did you have that issue? Did you get stuck at that sort of 1, 3, 5 levels? Or were they just things that you smashed through because you actually had a better plan focused on that big growth?
I mean, speaking specifically from an MSP industry point of view, and probably the service industry, if a business owner has got a majority share in a business and they're doing 1 million turnover, they're making a good living and they can get comfortable making that living. And that's really where it sits. And if you look at the UK demographic, there's so many MSPs that are at the 1.5 million mark. I think it's something like 80% of them. And then you've got the real big global players up the top. And then there's this gap between 3 and 20 million, and there's very few. I think there's something like 15% of UK MSPs sit in that space. So to our kind of goal to be able to approach bigger organizations, Brewdog, for example, or a client, people like that, we needed to be a step up that ladder, and that the focus on that. We've done work in the past with global oil and gas organizations and so forth as well. And to be able to sit at that table, you needed to prove that you were in the next tier up. And that's what kind of pushed us forward. And back to the point I was making earlier, that's when you have to expand your team. That's where you have to invest in really good professionals to be part of that and part of that growth strategy.
It's really interesting you mentioned Brewdog. For our US or international viewers, Brewdog is a very, very innovative brewery. They brew beer and they have a chain of quite successful bars here in the UK. And what makes Brewdog different is they're very, very innovative thinkers. I actually did some work for them back in 2009. I wrote a press release for them for about £200, which is really cool. I suspect you've done a lot more interesting things with them. But I often think that the clients of a business reflect the thinking of the business, and it doesn't surprise me, Rob, to hear that you've got a big thinking client and a very innovative and exciting client as one of your clients. Now, I'm going to ask both of you this. So Rob, you said that you said you took on a business partner. Did you? Forgive me, I forget the detail now. Did you start Dynamic Edge with a business partner, or was it Stuart? Wasn't it? Did he come on board later on?
Yeah, so I did start it with a business partner who, unfortunately, within a year had to leave the business because of some family issues she had to resolve. But I'd worked with Stuart. He'd been part of my team, and I'd worked for Lloyd's Register 20 years before. And our paths crossed in 2010. And immediately I thought, this is a guy that I need to get on board. He's absolutely on the same hymn sheet as me, and he's going to be an asset to the business. And quite quickly getting him on as an engineer and working through and so forth, it became apparent, I think, within 2 years that I moved into an operations director, and then some 2 years after that to the MD role. And it's key decisions like that. But I have known Stuart for probably, dare I admit it, 25 years or so.
Okay, so what I want to talk about is trust. And Nicholas, please jump in if you've got an opinion on this, because you have partners as well. It's one thing to trust your staff, I think. It's another thing to trust a business partner, because by their very nature, a business partner, when they take on a great deal of responsibility for the business, I think that there can be, certainly when I've come close to having business partners in the past, and I very much am a solo rider. I have a great team, but it's me at the top, and I can't see that changing. What's the level of trust that you need to build up with someone, and can you develop that with a stranger quickly, or do you need to have like the relationship like you have with Stuart?
Different for us, because I allowed him to invest in the business, and he's the only person I've allowed to do that over that period. So he had a tangible interest in what we're trying to achieve. And I think going back probably 8 years ago, I remember him saying to me, I understand your end game, Rob, and I want to be part of that. That was his exact words. He knew we've always been in the same hymn sheet. And when we're business together, we'd be in WhatsApp or calls every single day to discuss issues or run things by him. But one thing working together, that we didn't mess about with the decision-making process. If we needed to do something, we'd weigh up the pros and cons almost the same day and make that decision, not sit in it, So there's a little bit of that. But I've trusted him implicitly, and likewise the other way around, and we've been very transparent about that and where we both sit. So it did work really well. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But trust is absolutely a factor there, yes.
I was just going to add to that. I think that trust, a lot of that is absolutely critical. You're right. And I think a precursor to that is transparency. So you have to be completely transparent with each other, no filter, because often other people in a business will filter things going up because you're sat at the top table. So having utter transparency and being able to kind of duke it out, have that debate where you strongly disagree each other. But then once you've come to a path forward, even if one of you agrees, it's that disagree and commit thing. So, I don't agree with it, but we're going to go with this one, and I'm going to 100% now back it. And those kind of things over time, you very quickly learn in a couple of years. If that happens and people follow through on that and their transparency is there, then that trust, and you've got potentially a long-term business partner there. If those things aren't there, it's falls apart pretty quickly.
Final question for you, Rob, and then Nick, I want to just briefly talk about the consolidation of the MSP market. Rob, what are you doing with your time now?
I get asked that a lot. I mean, my initial focus was to get this over the line, and that was absolutely probably 99% of my time was focused on doing that and doing that correctly and with the right acquirer. So after what happened on the 23rd of October was I sat there and thought, right, okay, what next effectively? But I still have some interest. I'm still sitting as a trustee in a couple of charity boards, so involved from that perspective. But having only turned 50 last year, I think the next thing I want to do is look at more non-exec type work, so advisory. So I've been involved in 7 acquisition stroke disposals myself, so I do have experience in that area. So maybe assisting business owners with their journey and where they want to get to is something that really does interest me. And that's what I'm going to do 2022. I've got a couple of meetings next week to look at that and kind of push that forward. But that's the sort of stuff that really excites me.
And don't forget, you need to commission a yacht as well.
Yeah. That's the way to burn it all, I've heard. So no,
it is. Well, hey, what's good for Jeff Bezos has got to be good for everyone, right?
Yeah.
So, Nick, let's just finally look at consolidation. So, I think anyone who looks at our world in the UK, the US, internationally, we can see that there is a lot of MSP consolidation happening right now. We're seeing big super MSPs start to come together. They're happening within the UK. There's some names that many people would know. That the same things happening in the US. You and I only talked for the first time. I think it was about a month ago, and I think I said to you then, you were refreshingly non-capital in your approach to this. In that you're not, look at you're not there, sat there now in a shiny suit. You're not sat in some private office in Mayfair in London. You're actually a much more approachable a kind of in terms of consolidation from all the consolidators I've met over the years. What do you think is going to happen in the next? And I realise this is a bit crystal ball because no one really knows, but you're closer to it than anyone else. What in terms of consolidation? What do you think could happen in the next couple of years? What are we going to be looking at in the next 10 years?
I think for the immediate short term, in the next couple of years, like consolidation will continue, and I think those MSPs that can drive their value towards the 3-5 million and above, I think there'll be some quite interesting options there. But it's a competitive market. It's hard to win clients, but because they stay for a decent amount of time as well. Looking further into the future, I think one of the most interesting things about being in the MSP market is how technology is always changing. So it's always expanding. So, you have one revenue stream today that's now being cannibalized, and you're losing revenue from it. Let's say voice was a staple, really good. Telephony was a really high earner. That's getting cannibalized by Teams video. But then another opportunity opens up. As technology pushes more and more into other sectors, could you suddenly, as the MSP, now be looking after the accounting software for the business as well, because you're linking it up with Power BI and some visualizations? So you suddenly you encroach more and more into traditionally non-tech areas. So I think the potential to expand into clients, into more areas, I think is there. And there's some big bets people need to make on where they think those next frontiers are going to be. And there's ability to win big there, because if you stand still, the traditional MSP today will become commoditized, I think, the next 5 years. Okay, fine, we expect support, we expect even security, that will be commoditized. And so what else? Like, how are you niche? Oh, you're a specialist for the legal stuff in this particular area. Fine, and you've got these, that line of business software. Okay, now you've got a niche, now you've got high growth. So I think that will be the focus, moving to a more kind of specialized niche model for businesses and the MSPs going forward.
Gentlemen, thank you both so much. You've both been very generous with your time. This extended interview I know is going to be incredibly popular on YouTube. So thank you very much. I really enjoyed that.
No problem at all. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Nick.
Paul Green's MSP Marketing Podcast.
Extended interview.